Alright, so now we're going to talk about the oil system. Oil system is actually very simple. Um, right about here where my finger is, we can see, get a good angle on that. So this whole little section in here is actually an oil reservoir. And this is where you would, this little plug here, you can pull that out, or unthread it rather, and there should be a little rod on there. It'll indicate how much fuel is inside the reservoir. But the reservoir is very small on these. These engines were originally designed to run maybe 5 minutes tops. These are just starter motors for a much larger main engine on an A7 Corsair fighter plane. They fire them up. These engines spool up to full throttle, and it gets the main engine up to idle. Once the main engine reaches idle, you got a cutoff switch, and it just shuts this engine down. But you're talking maybe not even 5 minutes tops, and the entire start process for this is about 3 seconds. So what we've done is we've actually tapped off from an oil drain plug. So oil will drain back into the reservoir, come back through this little boost pump. This little oil boost pump just kind of helps feed oil into an oil cooler, which we have tucked up under this fairing. It's hard to see it up under here. And we've got a little 12-volt cooling fan to help kind of pull air through. But air kind of comes in through these vents here, goes in through that oil cooler down in there. And because we have this little boost pump, it will force oil back into should be this hose here. It should force oil back into the reservoir on the other side. Now you do have an oil pump in here, which I do believe. I mean, it should be the oil pump right in here, if I'm not mistaken. And the oil pump, I think it's what they call it, a gear rotor, and it just forces oil up into. There's two bearings in this, one on the compressor side, one on the turbine side, and it just forces oil into those bearings, and then it just drains back down into the reservoir. And that really is just it for the oil system. There's really nothing to it, because the original oil system on these engines was so small. By also adding the oil cooler and the extra lines, it gives us a little more oil quantity to play with. However, from my experience, that oil does get extremely hot, so I might put another little oil tank, maybe tuck it down in there. I've got a couple of small tanks we could use. That way it'll give us a little more run time and keep the temperatures down. Just as kind of a continuation of my first video about the oil system, I've got the actual oil diagram here. So this area here is going to be your oil sump, and there's a low pressure oil filter right in here. As the oil gets drawn into a gear pump, it turns into high pressure oil and goes through a high pressure oil filter all the way up into I don't know if it tees off or just goes to the first bearing here in the front behind the compressor wheel, and then makes its way towards the back. I know there's another oil tube in here. Makes its way to the aft bearing right next to the turbine blisk. Once it gets through this bearing, makes its way all the way back down. And the same with this. This bearing also has a low pressure oil return, and I'm assuming it probably helps lubricate this drive shaft for the accessory gearbox. But and it finds its way back down into the sump here. Now on the go-kart, there is I showed you guys there's a plug for checking the oil level, and there's also supposed to be like a drain plug at the bottom here. It's actually supposed to be a magnetic drain plug. Instead, they've tapped into that plug um, and sent it to the oil boost pump that pushes it through the oil cooler and then back to another plug on the opposite side of the oil reservoir, oil sump here. That's basically it.